The pot of chili was already simmering when my son walked through the front door, and I remember thinking that the evening was going to be a good one. It had been 3 months since I'd seen him in person. He'd been back and forth between Toronto and Vancouver for work, and I'd spent most of the afternoon cleaning the apartment and pretending I wasn't nervous about it. My son is not an easy man to impress. He built his logistics company from a spare bedroom in his 20s, and by the time he was 42, he had more employees than our entire hometown had residents. I am proud of him in the way that leaves you a little breathless sometimes. The way you look at someone and wonder how they came from the same kitchen table where you used to help them with long division. He came in stomping snow off his boots. It was February, that particular kind of gray Ontario February that makes you forget the sun exists, and he hugged me in that brief, solid way he has. The kind of hug that says, I'm here without making a production of it. My daughter was already there. She'd arrived an hour earlier with a bottle of red wine and her husband, and the three of them were now filling my small kitchen with the particular noise of a family catching up. Her husband was a quiet man, the kind who laughed at the right moments and never said more than he meant. I had always liked him well enough, though I wouldn't have said we were close. Dinner was good. The chili was good. My son kept refilling everyone's bowl without being asked, the way he always did, this habit he'd had since he was a teenager of feeding people when he didn't know what else to do with his affection. My daughter was telling a story about her neighbor's dog, and I was watching my family around my table and feeling something that I would have called, if pressed, contentment. That is when my son set down his spoon and said, very casually, the way you mention something you assume everyone already knows, "By the way, Dad, how's the house coming along? Have you got the place set up the way you want it?" I looked at him. "What house?" I said. The table went quiet in that particular way. Tables go quiet when something has shifted. When everyone present realizes simultaneously that the conversation has changed shape. My son looked at my daughter. My daughter's face did something I had never seen it do before. It didn't fall exactly. It sort of collapsed inward. Like a building going down floor by floor, very controlled, very slow, until there was nothing left standing. Then she pushed back her chair, said something that wasn't a word so much as a sound, and walked out of my apartment. Her husband sat very still for a moment, looking at the table, and then he got up too and followed her without meeting anyone's eyes. My son and I sat there with the chili getting cold between us. "What house?" I said again. I should tell you who I am, so you understand what I mean when I say that what happened next surprised me, because not much had surprised me in a long time. My name is Patrick, and I am 67 years old, and I have lived most of my life in a mid-sized city in southwestern Ontario in the way that most people live most of their lives, quietly, doing the work in front of me, trying not to miss the things that mattered. I worked for 31 years as a mechanical technician for a manufacturing plant outside of town. The kind of work that is invisible until something breaks, and then everyone notices. I was good at it. I retired at 62 with a modest pension and a handshake from my supervisor, and I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor of a building near the river, and I told myself that was enough, and I mostly believed it. My wife, my children's mother, passed away 11 years ago. Breast cancer diagnosed late, gone within 14 months. That is its own story and not this one, but I mention it because it is the reason my son started looking after me the way he did. Quietly, from a distance, in ways I often didn't know about until later. 2 years ago, he told me he wanted to buy me a house. Not a big house, a modest bungalow, something with a yard, something that was actually mine. He said the apartment depressed him every time he visited, which I told him was not a good enough reason to spend $400,000, and he said it wasn't just that, it was that I deserved something solid, something I could leave to them someday if I wanted, or sell, or do whatever I pleased with. He had the money, and he wanted me to have this. I told him to stop being dramatic. He bought the house anyway, sent me the address, said he'd have it transferred into my name within the month. That was 18 months before the dinner with the chili. I had never moved into it. I told myself I had been meaning to. I told myself the apartment was fine, that moving was a production, that I was too old to be packing boxes. I told myself a lot of things. What I had not told myself What I had not let myself think too hard about was that I had gone to see the house once, in the first week after my son told me the address, and when I drove by, the lights were on. I assumed it was a staging issue, a rental arrangement I hadn't been told about. I didn't ask. I was good at not asking. My son told me the rest of it that night. After the chili was cleared away and we were sitting with cups of coffee going cold on the table between us. He had transferred the house into my name, as promised. He had the documents, the confirmation from the lawyer, all of it. What he did not have was any understanding of why I had never mentioned it, never thanked him, never brought it up in any of the 18 months since. He had assumed I was living there. He had been picturing me in that house, in the yard, with the extra bedroom for when he visited. He had told people, colleagues, his assistant, his girlfriend in Vancouver, that his father had a house now, that things were better. I listened to him talk, and I felt something settling very slowly into the bottom of my chest, like sediment in a glass of water, heavy and dark and finally still. I said, "Walk me through the transfer again." He did. The lawyer's office, the title company, the date. I said, "And after that, did anyone contact you? Any follow-up from the property?" He thought about it. He said his assistant had forwarded him something about a title amendment a few weeks after the transfer, some administrative note he'd assumed was routine. He'd signed off without looking at it closely. He pulled it up on his phone and slid it across the table to me. I am not a lawyer. I did not understand everything I was reading, but I understood enough to know that the title to the house I had never moved into had been transferred again, approximately 6 weeks after my son transferred it to me, into the name of my daughter's husband. I set the phone down. My son was looking at me the way my son very rarely looks at me, which is like a boy instead of a businessman. "Dad," he said. "Don't," I said. "Let me think. I'm going to tell you what I knew about my daughter's situation at that point. And I want to be fair to her, because she is my child, and I have loved her since before she could walk, and love does not stop existing just because something breaks it. My daughter is 51 years old. She is sharp and funny and stubborn in ways I recognize because they are my stubbornness, inherited and repurposed. She married her husband 22 years ago in a ceremony in a park outside of Guelph, and I danced with her to a song I can't hear now without having to stop what I'm doing for a minute. I knew their finances had been difficult. Her husband had been laid off from his engineering position 2 years before all of this, and the severance had run out, and he was doing contract work that came and went. I had offered money twice. She had refused both times, warmly, firmly, in the way that meant the subject was closed. I did not know I had not known about the debt. I found out in pieces over the following 2 weeks, as my son quietly put together the picture that my daughter should have shown us. Credit card debt that had compounded over 3 years. A line of credit. A second line of credit. A second line of credit. A loan from her husband's parents that had curdled into a family rift. And underneath all of it, my daughter carrying it alone, not telling her brother, not telling me, convinced that she could find the edge of the hole and pull them out before anyone noticed how deep it had gotten. She had known about the house before I did. My son had mentioned it to her in passing, that he was going to do something for Dad, that he'd found a property, that he wanted to give me something real. She had been the one to find the property, actually. She had helped him choose it. And then, when the title transferred to me and I didn't move in, when weeks passed and the house sat empty and I made my excuses about the apartment, she had made a decision I still cannot entirely explain, because it required believing something that was not true, that I didn't really want the house, that I was going to let it sit, that she could use the equity to consolidate the debt, stabilize things, buy time, and transfer it back before anyone was the wiser. She had not transferred it back. 18 months. The house had been in her husband's name for 18 months, and she had sat across from me at Christmas and Thanksgiving and my birthday and a Tuesday in April when I called because I was thinking about her mother, and she had not said one word. She called me 4 days after the dinner. I let the phone ring twice before I picked up. That is not something I am proud of, but it is true. She was crying before she finished saying my name. Not the performed kind of crying, not the kind that asks for something. The ugly, effortful kind. The kind that sounds like it costs something to produce. I let her cry for a while. Then I said, "Tell me." She told me. All of it. The version I hadn't heard yet. The version from inside her own head. The panic she'd felt watching the debt climb. The shame of it. The specific Canadian family shame of financial failure. Of not managing. Of needing things and not being able to say so. The way she had told herself it was temporary. The way temporary had stretched and stretched until it was just her life. She said she had meant to tell me so many times. I said, "I know." She said, "I don't expect you to forgive me, Dad." I said, "I'm not ready to talk about forgiveness yet." She said, "Okay." I said, "But I need you to understand what you took. You didn't take a house. You took 18 months of me not asking too many questions because I trusted that things were the way they looked. You took that from me. I'm not a young man. I don't have unlimited months to spend not asking questions." The line was quiet for a long time. She said, "I know, Dad. I'm sorry." I believed her. I want to be clear about that. I believed she was sorry. It did not fix anything yet, but I believed her. My son handled the legal side of it. He is very good at that, at locating the mechanism of a problem and addressing it without drama. He spoke to a lawyer in Toronto and explained the situation, and within 3 weeks the title was corrected and the house was back in my name. He did not do this quietly. He sat across from his sister and her husband at a meeting I was not present for and laid out very calmly and very completely exactly what had happened and what the consequences would have been if he had chosen to pursue this legally rather than correct it privately. He told me afterward that her husband had not said much, that his sister had said a great deal, and that by the end of the meeting, some things had been said between them that needed saying and had not been said in a long time. I appreciated that he told me, but I also knew it was not the whole story. Siblings have their own architecture, their own history of grievances and loyalties that a parent only ever sees part of. Whatever happened in that room was between them, and I left it there. What I could not leave for a long time was the question of the house itself. I drove out to it on a Saturday in March, a different kind of February gray. The snow starting to loosen at the edges the way it does when you can almost but not quite believe spring is coming. I sat in the car in the driveway for a while. It was a small bungalow, tan brick, black shutters, the kind of house that looks like it has been quietly waiting. There was a bird feeder in the front yard that someone had put there. It was empty now. It had been empty a while, seeds scattered below it on the frozen ground. I got out of the car and used the key. Inside it smelled like a house that had been occupied and then emptied. Someone's life had been in here. Furniture marks on the carpet. A child's drawing left behind in the kitchen. Stuck to the fridge with a magnet from Niagara Falls. I stood in the living room for a long time looking at the dimensions of it, the way the afternoon light came through the front window. I thought about my daughter choosing this for me. I thought about her walking through these rooms and thinking this is right for him, he'll like this. And then I thought about everything that happened after. Both things were true at the same time, and I have been old long enough to know that this is the case with most true things. I moved in on the 1st of May. My son flew in from Vancouver for the weekend. He carried boxes up the front steps and made fun of how little furniture I owned, and ordered pizza that we ate on the floor because the table wasn't assembled yet. We watched a hockey game on a television balanced on a moving box, and he fell asleep on my old couch before the 3rd period was over, and I sat in the dark for a while listening to him breathe and looking around at the walls of my house. My house. I am not a sentimental man, or I have not been mostly. I have been practical out of necessity for so long that it has become my first language. But sitting there in the dark in a house that belongs to me, that my son bought and my daughter nearly took, and that I am now slowly making into a place where my life is happening, I permitted myself to feel it. The whole weight of it. My daughter and I have been finding our way back to each other in the way that you do when you are family, and there is no alternative. It is slow, and it is not always comfortable. We had dinner last month, just the two of us, and we talked about her mother for the first time in years. And when we left the restaurant, she hugged me in the parking lot for longer than she usually does. I did not tell her I had forgiven her. I am not sure I have entirely, or that forgiveness is even the right word for what I am working toward. What I am working toward is understanding, and understanding is harder and more expensive than forgiveness and, I think, more real. There is a yard behind the house. Not big enough. Big enough. In April, I ordered seeds from a catalog, the way my wife used to do every winter, sitting at the kitchen table with reading glasses and a pen, circling tomatoes and zucchini in colors I had never heard of. I don't know what I'm doing with the garden. I expect to make a lot of mistakes. The bird feeder in the front yard is full now. I filled it in March, and I have kept it full. There are chickadees that come every morning, and a pair of cardinals that arrive separately but seem to know each other, and some mornings I stand at the front window with my coffee and watch them, and I do not think about anything in particular. This is what 67 feels like when it goes right. You stop waiting for the next thing. You stand at a window in your own house in the gray Ontario light, and you watch the birds, and you let that be enough. And it is.